Before Skeletor ever raised the Havoc Staff at Castle Grayskull, there was Hordak. Before the Snake Men crawled out of their dimensional prison, there was Hordak. Before She-Ra even had a rebellion worth fighting for, yep, you guessed it, there was Hordak. This bat-faced warlord in a bone collar isn't just a problem for She-Ra, because he's responsible for much of the darkness that's haunted the Masters of the Universe. In some versions of the story, he's the reason Skeletor came to be, and why Adora spent years as a Horde soldier before becoming She-Ra. He's the shadow behind the shadow, basically the guy who created the villain. Depending on which version of the story we're looking at, he could be a scheming space dictator, an ancient conqueror from Eternia's far past, or a broken clone just trying to get some approval from someone who sees him as nothing but expendable. So where did Hordak actually come from? We're going to talk about all that and more in today's video, so buckle up because things are about to get villainous.
But we'll still have the last laugh.
Introducing Hordak, Return from Exile in the Vintage Mini-Comics and Filmation She-Ra, 1985 to 1987. Listen, here's the first thing you need to know about Hordak. He wasn't even supposed to be in the picture. Back in 1982 and 83, when the original Masters of the Universe toys launched, Skeletor was already making a name for himself. Hordak didn't exist. It wasn't until 1985 that he made his debut, and that was all about business. You see, Mattel needed a new bad guy to kick off a new toy line. They were working on She-Ra, Princess of Power, as a companion to He-Man, and that show needed a real villain. The character's design, with his white face, red eyes, bat-wing ears, and that striking bone collar, well, all of that came from a combination of Mattel and Filmation's creative teams, with Dave Capper from Mattel pushing for the look. Apparently, they even modeled his face after an African witch doctor mask to give him that perfect vibe. In the mini-comics, Hordak is all about dark magic and sorcery, way more than any mechanical stuff. He's tied to the Three Towers lore, showing he was around during Eternia's ancient days, not just as a conqueror, but as a creator. He's even tied to Eternia's ancient Three Towers era, hinting that his influence goes back further than most villains in the series. He didn't just try to take over, he also helped shape Eternia into what it is today. But when it comes to the Filmation version, the one most kids from the 80s remember, they changed things up quite a bit. Here, Hordak mostly ditched the magic for technology. He can transform his body into various weapons. His arms can become cannons, his chest opens to shoot projectiles, and he can even turn his whole torso into a rocket for flying. He runs Eternia from the Fright Zone, this industrial fortress, and commands a whole army of Horde troopers. But here's the catch. All this time, we thought he was in charge. Apparently, he wasn't. Hordak actually answers to Horde Prime, who leads the entire intergalactic Horde Empire. That power dynamic creates a tension that runs throughout the entire Filmation series, even when it's not front and center. And that's not all. We also get to see the backstory with Adora in the 1985 movie, He-Man and She-Ra, The Secret of the Sword. A flashback scene happens where Skeletor and Hordak team up to snatch the royal twins from the palace, but then Skeletor gets caught, and instead of remaining tight-lipped, he spills the beans on Hordak's location. Hordak escapes with baby Adora, while Man-at-Arms and the Sorceress show up too late. Adora grew up on Etheria, raised by Shadow Weaver to be completely loyal to the Horde, eventually becoming Hordak's right-hand officer. But when she finds out the truth and switches sides to the Great Rebellion, it's a huge blow for Hordak. Why? He loses his best soldier and takes a major hit all at the same time. Now, there is one Filmation episode that not many know about, which really dives into Hordak's character in a surprising way, even though the series usually played him for laughs. It's called My Friend, My Enemy, and it's the only time the show really questions who Hordak is behind all that bravado. We find out he once learned magic from a guy named Noah, a mentor who taught him almost everything before Hordak turned his back on magic for technology. That shift was a choice he made on purpose. Hordak keeps telling himself that Noah still respects him, even though their relationship fell apart. It's a small detail, but it hints that beneath the tough exterior, this tech-focused warlord is really just a guy trying to run away from something that magic couldn't give him. The episode of Shadows and Skulls provides further understanding of how the Horde interacts with others, and sometimes how clueless he is about his surroundings. Shadow Weaver secretly teams up with Skeletor to trap Hordak in an anti-magic cage. Of course, Skeletor, being Skeletor, ends up betraying Shadow Weaver too and traps her in that same cage. Hordak and Shadow Weaver manage to escape when they combine their strength, But sadly, Hordak never figures out that his own second-in-command had been conspiring against him. It's kind of tragic to see that everyone around him is up to something while he's totally in the dark. There's something sad about that, even though he's still an evil warlord who kidnapped a baby princess right out of her crib.
Eternia will be mine.
Hordak's role in the 2002 MYP, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. The 2002 series had no interest in keeping Hordak as a funny character or just a bit of a doofus as She-Ra's enemy. The writers for the MYP series took a deeper look at the franchise's backstory and figured that Hordak's biggest role wasn't about what he was up to right now, but what he did ages ago. In this version, Hordak is a legendary, scary figure, the Dark Warlord who clashed with King Grayskull, molded the history of Eternia, and is the main reason Skeletor ended up being more than just a wannabe alchemist named Keldor. In the backstory for the 2002 series, set in a far-off ancient time often referred to as Preternia during King Grayskull's reign, Hordak arrives with a massive army and begins waging war on the free people of Eternia. In some expanded lore tied to this era, he's also said to have battled the Snake Men for control of the planet, but the series itself focuses on his big war against Grayskull. The fighting is intense, and Hordak's big, desperate move is to use dark magic to pull Castle Grayskull into another dimension called Despondos. If this had worked, it would have completely changed Eternia's fate, but King Grayskull manages to wield the Sword of Power to turn the spell back on him, dragging Hordak and his entire army into Despondos instead. Hordak's physical form is destroyed in the process, and, in the aftermath of the battle, King Grayskull succumbs to his injuries, marking the end of that era. This moment directly ties into the power that fuels all future He-Men born from that final stand against Hordak. But wait, there's more. Before that banishment happened, there was one single moment that makes Hordak the most significant character in Masters of the Universe history. Keldor, this ambitious blue-skinned alchemist, had gathered a band of warriors and launched an attack on the Hall of Wisdom, but his acid assault splashed back into his own face. He was dying, his features destroyed beyond any natural healing. It was Evil Lyn who recognized his only chance at survival. She carried him to where Hordak's power could still be reached and summoned the ancient warlord. Hordak saved Keldor's life by stripping the destroyed tissue entirely from his skull, leaving behind a bare, floating cranium and transforming what remained into something new. The result was Skeletor, who became the primary antagonist of the entire franchise. Every evil scheme Skeletor's ever run, every assault on Castle Grayskull, every moment He-Man has ever had to step forward and fight, all of that begins the moment Hordak reached out his hand and made him. In Season 2, Evil Lyn seems to be up to something sneaky. She's seen diving into ancient texts driven by her ambition and the belief that Hordak has way more power than the skull-faced dude, aka Skeletor, she currently serves. She even finds a ritual that could free Hordak from Despondos. But when King Hiss catches wind of her plans, he shows some real, unexpected fear. That says a lot, because here's a guy who's been locked up for ages and came back without a second thought, yet he's scared of Hordak more than anyone else. Unfortunately for Evil Lyn, her ritual doesn't work, and Hordak stays stuck in Despondos. The whole liberation plot just hangs there, setting up a Season 3 that never came to be. And yeah, that's just how the 2002 series ends. It's not just Season 3 that got cancelled either. Evil Lyn's plans and the liberation of Hordak were also cut off exactly when things were heating up for his return. Season 3 was so close to showing Hordak finally being free and stepping into a world totally changed by the chaos he set into motion ages ago, facing off against a former student who's now calling himself the Lord of Destruction. That's got to be one of the biggest unfinished stories in animation history, and it's truly unfortunate we never got to see it. Hector Kerr, second-born heir from the 2009 MOTU Classics toy line bio. In 2009, Mattel dropped Hordak as one of the first figures in the Masters of the Universe Classics collector line, which was a Club Eternia exclusive. The coolest part is that on the back of the packaging, there were 4 sentences that really nailed down Hordak's origin like nothing else in official continuity. This bio doesn't come from a comic, an animated episode, or a graphic novel. It comes from a toy's packaging, and honestly, it might just be the creepiest version of Hordak's backstory you'll find in the entire franchise. It's confirmed here for the first time that Hector Kerr is his real name, and this is something you're not going to find in any official story. He's the second-born heir to the Horde Empire, not some self-made warlord grinding his way to the top, but a prince born into a family that's all about conquest. His dad is Lord Sepphoris Kerr, aka Horde Lord, and his mom is Quintessa. He has a younger brother named Hordor, or Corpulus Kerr, and an older brother, Horde Prime, who's basically the big boss of the entire empire. So, right from the start, he's been stuck in the middle trying to prove himself with an older brother who calls the shots above him and a younger brother below. It's a family legacy built on domination, and he's been working hard to stand out ever since. Hector Kerr showed up on Eternia during a rough period tied to its ancient past, often associated with the era of heroes like Hero. In the expanded lore, we're talking about the pre-Eternia age, long before the present-day conflicts. He built an army and went head-to-head with the Snake Men for control of the planet, even taking down King Hiss. But his conquest didn't last. When he eventually clashed with King Grayskull, leader of Eternia's free people, the battle turned against him, and he was banished to the dimension of Despondos. The bio gets interesting when it shows that Hordak, trapped in Despondos, is not just waiting around. Instead, he reaches out across dimensions to a young alchemist named Keldor. While in his prison, Hordak starts teaching Keldor dark magic, making a deal with Keldor who will one day help him break free. He spots this ambitious young guy on the other side and feeds his craving for power with forbidden knowledge. And all of this is happening from behind bars. He corrupts Keldor without even being there physically, essentially running a long-distance manipulation campaign from his cell. But then again, this is pretty different from the 2002 version where Keldor goes to Hordak directly after transforming. In the Classics bio, Hordak is the one who reaches out first. He makes the choice to contact Keldor, which shows him as a clever strategist even while imprisoned, rather than someone who's grasping for straws in a desperate moment. When the Hurricane Hordak Classics figure was released in 2011, it brought a new twist along with it. It was unexpected and definitely a shocker for Hordak. After Evil Lyn frees Hordak from Despondos, he returns to Eternia, only to find Skeletor has taken his old place. He upgrades his armor with this Hurricane Blaster, challenges the student who's taken over, and drives the Snake Men back into hiding as part of that comeback. The 2002 series never got to explore that angle, but the Classics bio at least gives a glimpse of it. Hordak's appearance in DC Comics. The DC Comics run of Masters of the Universe, which was active during the 2010s, featured writers like James Robinson, Keith Giffen, and Dan Abnett, and it really took Hordak's origin to a whole new level, giving him a cosmic and mythological spin like never before. It kicked off with a digital miniseries co-written by Robinson and Giffen, moving into an ongoing series, and it wrapped up with He-Man, The Eternity War, a 15-issue saga by Abnett that ran until 2016. One of the highlights is a one-shot called Masters of the Universe, The Origin of Hordak, released in 2013 as part of DC's Digital First series. Written by Keith Giffen and Brian Keene, with art by Giffen and Scott Koblish, this issue pulls heavily from Jack Kirby's New Gods. Hordak is shown as this epic cosmic conqueror, not tied to just one planet, but instead traveling through the universe and taking over entire civilizations. He comes off as something really ancient and genuinely scary, which the Filmation series didn't quite capture. The latest work on He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, specifically issue 5, dives deeper into Adora's backstory. We bet most people thought that Hordak kidnapping baby Adora was something that he did without giving much thought to it, but you'd be wrong to think that way. It was his way of getting back at King Grayskull's family, and it was very much deliberate. Hordak wasn't interested in wiping out Grayskull's descendants. I mean, that would have been too easy. Instead, he wanted to twist them. He took their kids, raised them in the Horde, and aimed to turn the most heroic bloodline in Eternia into weapons against the very people who locked him up. Adora, as a high-ranking officer in the Horde, is essentially Hordak's twisted revenge against Grayskull. She's more than just a soldier or a tool. She's a message that Hordak created by taking a stolen child. This issue really brings Adora's Despara persona to life in a way we haven't seen before. She's armored, fierce, and one of the Horde's most scary generals, showing off the dark side of Hordak's long-term plans. It's interesting to point this out because the DC Comics were setting things up way ahead of time, and it took over a decade for it to fully develop. The 2024 Netflix series Revolution, which is part of Kevin Smith's storyline, officially recognizes Despara, voiced by Grey Delisle, and her design is pulled straight from the 2013 comic. This draws a clear link between Hordak's big scheme to twist Grayskull's bloodline and Despara's creation, spanning from a 2013 digital comic to the 2024 show. All that's left to say is that the comics were really ahead of their time by about 11 years. His role in Netflix's She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, 2018 to 2020. No version of Hordak has been written with more care, emotional depth, or genuine sadness than the one N.D. Stevenson gave us in the 2018 Netflix series. Keston John voices Hordak in all 52 episodes across 5 seasons, but this version of Hordak is more than just a standard villain with an evil laugh and silly minions. Instead, he's a really troubled character, and I'm using character on purpose even though he's a clone of an intergalactic dictator whose whole identity is wrapped up in the need to prove himself to someone who has already labeled him a failure. So here's the backstory. Horde Prime is this big boss who runs a massive armada that's taken over most of the universe. He keeps his empire in check by cloning himself, and these clones are trained soldiers, all linked to a hive mind that makes them totally loyal. They don't get names or have their own identities, they just exist to serve. Hordak used to be Prime's #1 clone, but he began to physically break down due to a genetic defect. Basically, he became a flawed tool that was no longer useful to the Empire. In typical Prime fashion, instead of just tossing him aside, he sends Hordak on a suicide mission, expecting him to die for a slight chance at usefulness. But things don't go as planned. Hordak ended up falling through a weird portal and landed on Eternia, a secret planet hidden away from everybody in a dimensional pocket. With just a wrecked ship, a broken body, and the expertise of being a Horde soldier, Hordak started building his very own army from scratch, and he began taking over Eternia piece by piece. Every battle he fought on Eternia, every province he claimed, every cruel move he made, it all had just one goal: to reopen a portal to contact Horde Prime and show him what his rejected clone did all by himself, with zero resources on a planet Prime didn't even know existed. The whole war on Eternia is basically Hordak's way of applying for a job. Decades of conquering, all to impress the guy who tossed him aside. It's probably one of the most relatable reasons for wanting an empire in animated storytelling. He isn't just evil for fun or power, he acts this way because he wants to show his abuser that he matters. So he chose his own name, because as a clone he wasn't given one since clones are just numbered tools. He started calling himself Hordak after the empire he was created to serve, marking his first act of individuality. It might have been a small step, but it was entirely his. Then, Entrapta enters the story. Entrapta is the eccentric, boundary-free, and genuinely brilliant inventor princess who ends up with the Horde after a failed rescue mission leaves her behind in the Fright Zone. Catra takes advantage of this accident, convincing Entrapta that her friends abandoned her on purpose and bringing her into the Horde. Entrapta soon finds her way into Hordak's lab and is immediately fascinated not by his power or menace, but by his body. She's especially interested in the mechanical exoskeleton he uses to manage his physical decline, and she wonders why he's deteriorating at all. She treats his condition as a scientific puzzle. In her direct and emotionally honest way, she tells him that his imperfections make him interesting, even beautiful. For someone whose whole life has been shaped by the shame of being defective, this is unlike anything he has ever heard. Entrapta builds him a better exoskeleton and embeds a power crystal into its casing, an LUVD crystal, inscribed in the first one's language with the word loved. She adds it without telling him. He wears it against his chest for most of 2 seasons, not knowing what it says or why it's there. Catra watches the relationship between Hordak and Entrapta develop and considers what it might mean. Eventually, she acts. She tases Entrapta and sends her to Beast Island, then tells Hordak that Entrapta betrayed him by letting the princesses into the Fright Zone. Hordak, who always expects and experiences betrayal, believes her. The person who told him his imperfections mattered is gone, and the pain this causes him is deeper than anything the Great Rebellion managed over years of war. Horde Prime arrives on Eternia in Season 4 and isn't impressed. He sees Hordak as a defective clone who managed to build a small empire on a hidden planet and dismisses it as an achievement. Prime acts quickly and completely. He mind-wipes Hordak, erasing every individual trait, including his name, memories, emotional connections, and sense of self, and starts reconditioning him as a blank clone again. Now, many will think of this as a punishment, but that's not what it means. This was done as a way to maintain things, because usually when a tool breaks, you don't punish it, you simply reset it. Season 5 tells the story of Hordak slowly recovering his sense of self. The LUVD crystal in his exoskeleton brings back pieces of him that Prime's reconditioning couldn't completely erase. When he and Entrapta finally reunite in the aftermath of the Horde's last campaign, he asks her a question that feels straight out of a dramatic script.
What have you done to me?
He doesn't mean it as an accusation, but in genuine confusion. He's become someone who feels another person's loss, and he truly doesn't understand how she made that happen. In the series finale, Horde Prime makes his final move against Eternia and orders Hordak to execute Entrapta. Hordak refuses. Instead, he raises his weapon and fires at Horde Prime. He grabs Prime by the throat, lifts him, and says his own name out loud, declaring who he chooses to be. She-Ra then exorcises Prime from the bodies he's possessed, and for the first time, Hordak is truly free. He and Entrapta are reunited among the ruins of a fallen empire. The first truly independent act Hordak ever makes, the first choice that's completely his own, is to protect the person who showed him he was worth saving. This might be the most complete redemption arc in Masters of the Universe history, or the most well-earned villain-to-human transformation in any animated series. Maybe it's both. Hordak in 2021's Revelation and 2024's Revolution. Kevin Smith's Revelation continuity introduces Hordak gradually. His presence is felt long before he's actually seen, and his name carries weight even before a face is revealed. In Revelation, he never appears in person. The finale of Part 2, titled Comes With Everything You See Here, ends with Skeletor at Snake Mountain, pinned down by cultists and infected with a technovirus. A panel in Motherboard's helmet slides open to show a holographic symbol, the bat-winged emblem of the evil Horde. Hordak is introduced through symbols, not by showing himself. He's a promise, not yet a character. This careful approach is intentional, making his later appearance in Revolution much more impactful. However, it should be noted that the 2021 Mattel CGI animated series is separate from Revelation and aimed at a younger audience, and it takes a very different approach. In this version, Hordak appears to Eva Lynn as Horakoth, first as her spirit bat, and later, in the final moments, revealing himself as her father, making her his herald. This father-daughter relationship is new to the series. However, the DC Comics Eternity War arc has already shown a strong connection between Eva Lynn and Hordak, with Eva Lynn becoming the sorceress of Horakoth. The family bond, however, is unique to the CGI series. It changes how we see this version of Eva Lynn. Clearly, her hunger for power, her deep loneliness, and her willingness to destroy everything for something she cannot name show her as someone who is shaped by the absence of a father she never knew. In Revolution, which premiered on Netflix in January 2024, Hordak is now fully voiced by Keith David, a well-known voice actor in American animation. Hordak acts through a proxy, Motherboard, a technological being made from Horde technology who has secretly taken over Eternia's systems, corrupting them and eventually absorbing Skeletor into its network. Hordak's plan is careful and calculated. He uses Motherboard to weaken Eternia before showing up himself, letting his technology do the early damage and then arriving once the planet is vulnerable. This is the strategy of a leader who's learned from his past mistakes. Revolution ends with something the franchise has genuinely never done before. Hordak is defeated by Skeletor. He's not beaten by He-Man, She-Ra, a heroic sacrifice, or even magic, but by his own former student who now has a different kind of power. The teacher is beaten by his creation. Despara, who is strongly suggested to be Adora and voiced by Grey Delisle, closes the series with a promise instead of comfort. Although we do have to mention that the series deliberately withholds explicit confirmation of this whole Adora-Despara thing, partly due to complicated media rights around the She-Ra character. Anyways, Despara finds the wounded Hordak and doesn't help him. Instead, she says that Horde Prime will heal him, and when he's ready, they'll return to Eternia together to destroy Skeletor and He-Man. This scene is full of scheming and new threats, not recovery. It very clearly hints at the next battle rather than an ending, and it's unfortunate that, as of early 2026, there's still no official announcement regarding a continuation.
So let this be our final battle!
The return of Ancient Conqueror in 2021 Netflix CGI series He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. The 2021 CGI Netflix series, created by House of Cool and animated by CG Inc., targets a younger audience and returns to the Ancient Conqueror theme of the 2002 series. It features Hordak as the dark warlord from Eternia's mythological past, who's imprisoned by King Grayskull in Despondos. Fast forward to the present day, and he's freed to start his conquest all over again. Throughout the series, he's built up as a major threat, but really only shows up in the final episode. This approach is reminiscent of the 2002 series, which used him as more of a big goal rather than a constant bad guy. The main thing that sets this version apart isn't the story, as most of us would like to think, but the casting. Hordak in the 2021 series is voiced by Kevin Conroy, who's basically the ultimate animated Batman. His voice literally shaped how a whole generation witnessed superheroes, and when he brought that vibe to Masters of the Universe's oldest villain, it meant something. His portrayal gave Hordak this chilling, steady authority that younger viewers might not completely understand, but anyone who's grown up with these characters would absolutely recognize. It's like he's been lurking in the shadows for ages, which is exactly what Hordak's been up to in every storyline. Season 3 dropped in August 2022, but sadly, Kevin Conroy passed away on November 10th, 2022, which was just a few months after the series wrapped up and fans got to see his work as Hordak. The show ended up cancelled after 3 seasons and 26 episodes, leaving Hordak's storyline hanging, just like the 2002 series before it. There was even a plan for a 4th season that would have featured a full-on Hordak invasion, but it never got created. Conroy was one of the most celebrated voices in animation, and in one of his final roles, he didn't really get enough time to truly shine or give Hordak the depth he deserved. It's definitely something worth acknowledging, even though it's not a full tribute. So what's the conclusion on Hordak? I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a common thread across almost every iteration of him. He always loses. Whether it's in battle, to his own students like Skeletor, or to the very child he raised, like Adora becoming She-Ra, Hordak is constantly defeated. He even loses to the empires he serves, like when Horde Prime discards him, and even to time itself, as seen in the 2002 series, where his return was being built up, but the show was cancelled before he ever broke free. Across 40 years of storytelling, he remains the ultimate losers of the Masters of the Universe franchise, shaping others' destinies while never fulfilling his own. In our opinion, the 2018 Netflix version presents the most compelling version of Hordak, far surpassing the others. While the Filmation version has its nostalgia and depth, the 2002 version is more grand and threatening. N.D. Stevenson and Keston John transformed a simple 1985 toy into a moving character. Hordak is portrayed as a defective clone who named himself and chose one person over an entire empire. The 2018 version was more than just a villain story, it showed what it really costs to become a true person. So here's the question we want to leave you with today. Is the 2018 redemption arc the best thing that ever happened to Hordak's character? Or does giving him a heart weaken a villain who was more compelling when he was irredeemably dark? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section down below, and while you're down there, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, especially if you want to see more He-Man content on this channel. We'll see you soon in the next one, but until then, thanks for watching, and we'll see ya in the next one.